The city growled the moment I said the word integration. I felt it in my teeth before I heard it in the streets. The glass hall reflected me 100 times over. Clean lines, polished shoes, a tailored jacket that smelled faintly of citrus and money. The upper city loved mirrors. It loved the illusion that everything could be duplicated without consequence. Integration, I repeated, steady and calm, my voice amplified and softened by the room's acoustics. Not assimilation, not control, shared routes, shared spaces. A system designed to let mixed packs move without friction. On the screen behind me, the model rotated, translucent towers stitched together by green corridors. Open transit lines threading the city like veins. Wolves, alphas, betas, omegas, represented as light, not bodies. No teeth, no blood, just flow. The commission watched with pleasant faces. Too pleasant. The kind of smiles that never reached the eyes, because the eyes were busy calculating margins. I smiled back. An alpha's smile. Measured, unthreatening. The one I'd learned to wear when I wanted people to listen instead of brace. Inside, my jaw tightened. It wasn't fear. I knew fear. Fear had a clean edge. This was irritation, a low hum under my skin, like static, the kind you feel before a storm breaks, when the air itself seems to lean away from you. I clicked to the next slide. The city is sick, I said, but not broken. What we're seeing, pack violence, territorial flare-ups, black zones. It's not pathology, it's scar tissue. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. I ignored it. Scar tissue forms when a wound is closed too fast, I went on. You can't force healing. You have to reopen the path. Let the city breathe. My teeth ached. Just slightly, like I'd been grinding them in my sleep. I paused, resting my hands on the edge of the podium. The glass was cool, flawless, sterile, the kind of surface that never remembered who'd touched it last. For a second, just a second, I had the absurd urge to look over my shoulder, as if the city itself might be standing there, massive and silent, deciding whether to let me finish. Mr. Calder, one of the commissioners said smoothly, your optimism is refreshing. Optimism. Right. I inclined my head. It's not optimism. It's design. Laughter. Soft. Polite. The presentation ended in applause. Clean. Controlled. Exactly as planned. That was when my wristband vibrated. Once. Twice. Urgent. I glanced down despite myself. A red alert pulsed across the screen. Lower Sector 9. Unregistered pack altercation. No trigger. No flagged provocation. My skin prickled. The commissioner was still speaking, something about timelines and feasibility, but his voice blurred into background noise. My focus tunneled. Instinct pulling tight like a wire. Lower Sector 9 sat directly beneath the eastern edge of the proposed integration zone. I swallowed. Excuse me, I said, already stepping back. I need to take this. No one stopped me. They never did. Not when you moved with purpose. The elevator down was a descent through layers of privilege. Light dimmed. Glass gave way to reinforced steel. The air grew warmer, heavier, threaded with the scent of oil and bodies and old stone. By the time the doors opened, the noise hit me full force. Shouting, the wet crack of impact. A snarl, raw, animal, unrestrained. Two packs collided in the open corridor, bodies a blur of motion and teeth. Not rivals. Not flagged enemies. Just chaos, like something had reached into them and twisted. Security drones hovered uselessly at the edges, their warnings drowned out by instinct. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with recognition. This wasn't random. I backed away slowly, pulse thudding in my ears. The ache in my jaw eased, replaced by a cold certainty that settled deep in my chest. The city had answered, and it hadn't liked what I said. I turned toward the transit stairs that spiraled further down, into the older levels, places the upper city preferred to forget existed. Glass and light above me, rust and shadow below. The contrast hit like a breath held too long and finally released. I took the first step down. Whatever I'd touched with my project, whatever nerve I'd brushed against. I was going to have to see it up close. The transition zone never pretended to be anything else. It smelled like rust and overheated circuits, like rain trapped where it didn't belong. The upper city ended here, not with a wall, but with a series of reluctant compromises. Illegal platforms bolted onto old infrastructure, freight elevators that groaned like they resented every descent, cables hanging where design had once given up. This was where projects came to die, which was exactly why I was here. I stood near the edge of an unauthorized lift bay, hands in my pockets, posture loose but alert. The lower levels moved differently. People didn't rush unless they had to. They watched first, calculated, chose routes the way prey chose wind direction. I needed a guide, someone who knew which paths were alive and which ones only pretended to be, looking lost or just slumming it. The voice came from my left. Close, too close for comfort. I turned. He was lean, compact in the way of someone built for speed rather than dominance. Dark jacket, seams worn pale with age, patched at the elbows. Boots scuffed but solid. His hair fell into his eyes like it hadn't been told yet that fashion existed down here. What caught me wasn't the look. It was the calm. His gaze flicked over me. Quick, efficient. Jacket, shoes, wristband. The way I held myself. Alpha, his eyes said without accusation. Project. Trouble. Alex Calder, I said, offering my name the way I'd been trained to. Open, neutral. I'm looking for a local guide. That earned me a slow blink. Oh, he said, that's adorable. I almost smiled. And you are? I asked. Theo. No last name. No hesitation. And you're about 6 levels too high to be asking that question out loud. I pay well, he snorted, turning away. So does everyone right before something explodes. I followed him anyway. He didn't tell me not to. We stopped beside a railing overlooking a shaft that dropped into shadow. Freight lifts sliding up and down like tired insects. You're here about the integration zone, Theo said. Casual as a weather report. It wasn't a question. I exhaled. Is it that obvious? Alpha with clean shoes shows up after a pack loses its mind in Sector 9. He glanced back at me. Yeah, pretty sure you're not sightseeing. I'm trying to fix something, I said. That got a real look. Sharp. Assessing. Fix, he repeated. Right. You people love that word. I bristled before I could stop myself. You people? The ones who think cities are puzzles instead of scars. There it was. The bite. Integration isn't assimilation, I said, keeping my tone even. It's about shared access. Roots. Reducing friction. Theo laughed. Not loud. Just enough to sting. Integration, he said, tasting the word like it might poison him. That's a pretty label for forcing things that don't belong together into the same box. That's not... Relax, he cut in. I'm not here to argue policy. I just don't work for it. So that's a no. That's a hell no. He pushed off the railing and took 2 steps away. I moved before instinct could talk me out of it. What if I give you access? He stopped. Access to what? He asked carefully. My project maps, I said. Live data. Planning permissions. Restricted zones. Theo turned slowly, eyes narrowed. That kind of access gets people disappeared, he said. Or keeps them alive, I countered. If they know where not to go. Silence stretched between us, thick with possibility. Finally, he huffed a quiet laugh. You really don't know how this city works. No, I said honestly. That's why I'm here. He studied me for a long moment, like he was deciding whether I was worth the risk or the trouble. I don't believe in projects, Theo said at last. Only roots. That's fine, I replied. I just need you to show me where the city actually breathes. He considered that, then nodded once. All right, Alpha, he said. I'll guide you. He stepped toward the elevator and gestured me forward. But don't confuse access with trust, he added. And don't say integration down here again unless you want to lose teeth. I followed him into the rusted lift, pulse ticking a little faster than before. Collision, I realized, didn't always feel like impact. Sometimes it felt like momentum. The lower we went, the heavier the air became. Not thicker, heavier, like it pressed back. The freight lift rattled to a stop with a sound that went straight into my skull. When the doors slid open, a dull ache bloomed behind my eyes, sharp enough to make me blink and steady myself against the wall. Theo noticed. "Don't fight it," he said, stepping out first. "Makes it worse." "What is this place?" I asked, rubbing my temple. "Home," he replied lightly. Then, after a beat, used to be. The Undercity stretched out in layered corridors and repurposed spaces. Old residential tiers stacked like sediment. Apartments carved into concrete. Lights strung where official wiring had long since failed. Autonomous settlements pulsed with quiet life. Shared kitchens, patched gardens under artificial suns. People moving with the confidence of those who knew exactly where they belonged. My jaw tightened again. Pressure built in my chest, like the city itself was breathing too close to me. The headache sharpened, spreading downward, settling behind my eyes. Every raised voice echoed louder than it should have. Every movement felt slightly too fast, too aggressive. "This zone," I said slowly. "It's reactive." Theo shrugged. "You feel it now?" "Yeah. Good. Means you're not broken." We moved deeper, following routes that weren't marked on any official map. Theo walked ahead, unhurried, hands loose at his sides. He knew when to slow down, when to cut left, when to avoid a cluster of people entirely. "Here." He looked comfortable. The tension that had coiled his shoulders up above was gone. His steps were lighter, his gaze less sharp. This wasn't a hostile environment to him. It was familiar. Ahead of us, a small mixed pack argued near a junction. Voices rising, scents flaring. No clear reason, no trigger I could see. My skin prickled. Instinct screamed warning. "They're not unstable," Theo said quietly. "They're reacting." "To what?" I asked. He glanced at me. "You." I stopped. He didn't say it accusingly, just factual, like gravity. "This area's marked for integration," he continued. "Been whispered about for months. Packs know when something's coming. City tells them." "That's not possible," I said automatically. "Information doesn't." Theo cut a look at me. "Maps don't show this," he said. "Neither do models." We passed beneath an old transit arch, its surface etched with faded markings. Names, symbols, claw scratches worn smooth by time. I felt a sudden wave of dizziness, sharp enough to make my vision blur. I staggered. Theo caught my arm without thinking. His grip was firm, grounding. "Don't linger here," he said, already pulling me forward. "This spot holds." "Holds what?" I asked through clenched teeth. He didn't answer right away. We moved quickly until the pressure eased, the headache receding to a dull throb. Theo finally let go. "People lived here," he said, nodding back toward the tunnel. "Before the city decided they didn't fit." My throat tightened. "What happened?" I asked. "They closed it too fast," he said. "Rebuilt, rebranded. Like nothing had been there before." His mouth twisted, humorless. "City doesn't forget that kind of thing." I looked around, at the patched walls, the improvised lights, the people who'd carved something livable out of what was left behind. My project overlay flickered to life on my wristband, projecting clean lines over the mess. Routes, zones, flows, lies. "These maps," I said quietly. "They're missing entire layers." Theo snorted. "Now you're catching on." I lowered my wrist, letting the projection die. The city hummed beneath my feet, a low, restless vibration, not sick, not broken, wounded. And I was standing right on the scar. The meeting room was designed to make everyone look reasonable. Soft shadow instead of darkness. Frosted glass instead of walls. Screens that dimmed automatically when someone raised their voice. As if the system itself disapproved of emotion. I took my seat at the long curved table and immediately missed the noise of the Undercity. At least down there, tension announced itself honestly. "Here," It wore suits. "Let's address the recent disturbances," one of the curators said, fingers steepled. His voice was smooth, perfectly modulated, an alpha, technically, but there was no scent of territory on him, no edge, just power filtered through protocol. A screen lit up with data graphs. Controlled, sanitized. Lower sector incidents fall within acceptable deviation, an investor added. Short-term instability is expected during optimization phases. Optimization. I felt my jaw tighten again. Expected by whom? I asked. Because the packs down there don't seem to have received the memo. A few smiles flickered around the table. Polite. Tolerant. Alex, the curator said gently, using my first name like a calming hand on the shoulder. Your role is design. Implementation requires flexibility. Flexibility, I echoed. Or control. The word landed wrong. I felt it immediately. The subtle shift in posture, the way attention cooled. Another screen activated, replacing the previous model with a simplified schematic. Fewer details. Fewer routes. I frowned. That's not the latest version. No, the investor said easily. We streamlined it. By removing half the autonomous zones, I said. Those were critical. They were redundant. Someone else cut in. Inefficient. There it was. I leaned forward. Those zones exist because previous systems failed them. You can't just… Alex, the curator interrupted, still calm, still smiling. This isn't about sentiment. It took effort not to bare my teeth. What is it about then? I asked. A brief pause, just long enough to be intentional. Redistribution, the investor said. Population flow, risk mitigation, control, I said flatly. The room went very quiet. Control ensures safety, the curator replied. For everyone like you, my instincts snarled. I pulled up my wristband, calling for the deeper data sets, the behavioral overlays, the historical layers Theo had hinted at. The screen flickered, then displayed a neutral access symbol. Restricted. I tried again. Same result. When did my clearance change? I asked. A shrug from across the table. Certain datasets were deemed non-essential at this stage. Non-essential. My stomach dropped. You're using the integration zone as a filter, I said slowly. A way to draw people out. No one corrected me. The confirmation settled like ice in my chest. This wasn't the agreement, I said. It's an evolution, the curator replied smoothly. You of all people should appreciate adaptive systems. I thought of the Undercity, of the way Theo had moved through it like someone walking a remembered path, of the pressure in my skull when we'd crossed certain thresholds. This will get people hurt, I said. The investor's smile never wavered. Some disruption is unavoidable. Clean hands. No blood. Just language. I pushed back from the table, the chair whispering softly across the floor. You're turning a design meant to heal into a trap. And you, the curator said mildly, are letting proximity cloud your judgment. That stung because it was close enough to the truth to matter. I left the room without waiting for dismissal. The corridor outside felt colder than before. Emptier. My footsteps echoed too cleanly. For the first time since I'd started this project, a thought took shape that I couldn't immediately dismantle. What if I wasn't fixing the city at all? What if I'd just handed it a sharper knife? Construction zones have a smell. Hot metal. Fresh concrete. The sharp electric tang of systems that aren't finished deciding what they are yet. It crawled up my nose as we moved along the perimeter, warning my instincts long before my brain caught up. Theo slowed. Something's wrong, he said. I opened my mouth to agree, and the ground lurched. The blast wasn't loud. Not at first. It was a deep concussive thud that punched through my chest and rattled my teeth. The lights overhead flickered, then died, plunging the corridor into emergency red. Sabotage. Move, Theo snapped, already running. I followed, heart slamming. Boots skidding on dust and loose gravel. Alarms screamed somewhere above us. The half-built transit arch groaned, metal protesting as stress redistributed itself in ugly, unpredictable ways. Behind us, a section of the ceiling gave way. Concrete exploded downward. Theo swore and cut sharply left, dragging me with him. My shoulder slammed into the wall. Pain flared, bright, clean, grounding. We burst through an access hatch and into the emergency tunnels below. The air colder here, damp and stale. My breath came fast, sharp in my chest. Did this? I gasped. Does it matter? Theo shot back. Run. We didn't get far. The tunnel ahead filled with bodies. Too many, too fast. An aggressive pack surged out of the shadows, eyes bright, movements jagged. Their scents clashed violently, overloaded with fear and territorial rage. They weren't targeting us. They were reacting. My instincts flared hard, alpha presence snapping awake without permission. I felt my posture shift, shoulders squaring, a low growl building in my chest. Theo slammed into me. Don't, he hissed. You'll make it worse. He was right. The pack's attention flickered toward me, agitation spiking. Down, Theo said, grabbing my collar. I didn't argue. He hauled me backward just as the tunnel ceiling collapsed where we'd been standing seconds earlier. Dust and debris thundered down, cutting us off from the pack with a choking cloud. The impact threw me off my feet. Pain exploded across my ribs as I hit the ground. Air punched out of my lungs in a helpless wheeze. Before panic could set in, Theo was there. Hands on my jacket, grip iron hard. He dragged me across the rough floor, ignoring my weight, my protests, the scrape of concrete against skin. Still breathing? He demanded. I nodded, coughing. Yeah, good. Another tremor shook the tunnel. Theo yanked open a maintenance hatch I hadn't even seen and shoved me inside following a heartbeat later. The space was barely big enough for two people. Walls vibrating as the structure above us settled with a sound like a giant exhaling. We sat there, pressed close, dust coating our clothes and skin. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it might bruise me from the inside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Theo laughed. It burst out of him, sharp, breathless, a little hysterical. I stared at him, stunned. Then the absurdity of it all caught up with me, and I laughed too. Short, disbelieving, adrenaline-fueled. That, I said between breaths, was not on the project timeline. Theo shot me a look. You think? The laughter faded, leaving behind a charged silence. I became acutely aware of how close we were. My shoulder pressed against his, the heat of him steady and real. He'd saved me. No hesitation, no speech. Just action. Thank you, I said quietly. Theo's expression shifted, something unguarded flickering across his face before the sarcasm slid back into place. Try not to die, he said. Makes my job harder. Still, he didn't pull away right away. Neither did I. Outside, the city groaned and settled around us, roots breaking and reforming in ways no model could predict. And for the first time since this had all begun, I trusted the person beside me more than the plan in my head. The shelter was older than the roots above it. You could feel it in the walls, thick, uneven concrete that had been poured by hand, reinforced and patched and reinforced again. Emergency lights hummed weakly, casting everything in a dull amber glow. Someone had painted over old symbols, but they still bled through like bruises. We stopped there because Theo said it was safe, because his shoulders finally dropped when we crossed the threshold. That should have told me everything. I leaned against the wall, ribs aching, adrenaline still buzzing under my skin. Theo moved deeper into the room, shedding his jacket and hanging it on a hook that looked like it had been there for decades. You come here often? I asked, trying for light. He didn't answer right away. Sit, he said instead, nodding toward a low bench. You're bleeding. I glanced down. He was right. Scraped knuckles, a shallow cut along my forearm I hadn't felt yet. I sat. Theo grabbed a med kit from a recessed panel. Movements automatic. Practiced. You're good at this, I said. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Had to be. He cleaned my arm without ceremony. Efficient. Careful in a way that suggested long habit rather than kindness. When he was done, he stepped back, arms folding across his chest. This, he said, gesturing around us, is where I grew up. The words landed heavier than the concrete. I looked around again, seeing it differently now. The reinforced corners, the way the space curved inward, protective, not temporary. How long? I asked quietly. Theo huffed a humorless laugh, long enough to learn which walls listen. I didn't smile. My pack lived in this tier, he continued. Before the city decided we were inconvenient. My stomach tightened. They called it redevelopment back then, he said. Promised better housing, safer routes, integration. There it was. They split us up, Theo went on. Moved families into separate sectors, said it would reduce conflict. Did it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, he said, flatly. It just made us easier to erase. Silence filled the shelter, thick and suffocating. That's not what integration is supposed to be, I said, heat creeping into my voice. What I designed is a cleaner version of the same thing, Theo cut in sharply. That's not fair, I snapped. I'm trying to stop this from happening again. You're building on bones, Alex. The way he said my name, no edge, no anger, hurt more than if he'd shouted. My project is meant to heal, I insisted. To open roots, not close them. And what happens, Theo shot back, to the people who don't want your roots? I hesitated. He saw it. That's what I thought. I stood, frustration burning through the ache in my body. You think I don't care about the people down here? I came here because I saw something was wrong. You came here because something broke your model, Theo said. Not because we're dying. That's not... You're an alpha, he said. You believe if you design the right system, everyone will fall into place. I clenched my fists. And you think protecting what's left means freezing everything in pain forever? His eyes flashed. I think people matter more than plans. We stared at each other, breathing hard, the city humming around us like a held breath. I trusted you, Theo said quietly. Because I thought you were different. The words sank deep, cold and sharp. I am, I said, even as doubt twisted in my chest. Maybe, he allowed. But not enough. He grabbed his jacket from the hook and shrugged it on. The integration zone? He said, to us it's just another name for a purge. That's not what I want, I said. But it's what will happen, he replied. With or without you. He stepped toward the exit, then paused. For what it's worth, he added, not looking back, I don't think you're doing this on purpose. Then he was gone, footsteps fading into the tunnels. I sank back onto the bench, the weight of the shelter pressing in. I hadn't meant to betray anyone, but intent, I was starting to realize, didn't stop a knife from cutting, and somewhere above me, the city shifted, restless, wounded, waiting for the next mistake. The upper city felt hollow without Theo. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the quiet, not the efficiency, but the absence of friction. Roots that were supposed to hum with movement lay eerily empty on my screens. The integration corridors glowed a sterile blue, flawless and unused, like veins waiting for blood that never came. I worked alone. Meetings blurred into data reviews. Design tweaks stacked on top of revisions that stripped more life out of the project with every pass. Autonomous zones were temporarily suspended. Community liaisons were reassigned. Security overlays thickened. I argued. At first, then my objections were logged, acknowledged, and ignored. Without Theo, I had no sense of what my changes did on the ground. No instinctive check against reality. Just models feeding models. Numbers, smoothing out the human noise until nothing rough remained. The city stopped growling. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Alerts began to come in quietly. Not riots. Not violence. Just detentions. Targeted removals framed as compliance checks. Packs flagged for non-cooperation relocated for assessment. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was safer than chaos. Then I saw the lists. They appeared in a restricted data stream I wasn't supposed to have access to anymore. A glitch, maybe. Or a leftover permission no one had bothered to revoke. Names scrolled past in neat columns. Locations, pack affiliations, lower sector identifiers. My chest tightened. I scanned faster, pulse climbing, until I saw one I recognized. then another. Routes Theo had shown me lit up in red, overlaid with containment markers. The same paths he'd told me never to linger in. The same areas where the city pressed too close, where memory clung like residue. They weren't stabilizing anything. They were flushing people out. A knock sounded at my office door. I didn't answer. The smell of the upper city, clean, artificial, suddenly made my stomach churn. I pushed back from the desk and stood, pacing the length of the room like a caged animal. My reflection followed me in the glass walls, every version of me calm and composed and complicit. I thought of Theo's hands on my jacket, dragging me out of falling concrete. Of his voice, sharp and urgent. Don't. My project had given them a map. Worse, it had given them permission. I pressed my palms to the glass and leaned my forehead against it, teeth aching again, harder than before. The sensation spread through my skull, settling behind my eyes like pressure building with nowhere to go. I've become part of the hunt, I whispered to my reflection. The words felt obscene, heavy. An alpha without a pack. An architect who'd built a trap. Outside, the city moved on without me. Routes rerouted, decisions executed cleanly and quietly. The system didn't need my belief anymore. It had already learned how to use my ideas. And for the first time since I'd stepped into the transition zone, I understood the full shape of my fall. Not from idealism. From obedience. The project control center sat at the core of the upper city like a buried organ. Windowless, climate-controlled, insulated from consequence. I hadn't been here since the early design phase. Back then, it had felt like a cockpit. Power with a purpose. Now it felt like a bunker. I gained access on a clearance that technically no longer belonged to me. The system hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before the doors slid open. That pause told me everything I needed to know. Inside, the room glowed with layered projections, live routes, population flows, security overlays pulsing in synchronized rhythm. Beautiful, efficient, lethal. I moved to the central console and pulled up the deepest layer I could reach. The one they'd hidden under 3 euphemisms and a compliance protocol. Operational phase, final clearance. My throat went dry. The plan unfolded with brutal clarity. Integration corridors activated in sequence, security pressure increasing incrementally, packs pushed toward designated safe zones. Extraction points, containment, removal. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't mitigation. It wasn't control. It was a purge. I scrolled faster, heart hammering, scanning for locations I recognized. There. Theo's roots lit up like open wounds. Sector flagged high risk. Autonomous settlement clusters marked for accelerated processing. People he knew. People who trusted him. Targets. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the screen while something inside me went very still. This was the point of no return. I understood that with a clarity that bordered on calm. If I did nothing, the system would proceed flawlessly. I'd keep my position, my influence, my reputation as the alpha who finally fixed the city. If I interfered, I exhaled slowly. The ache in my teeth flared sharp and insistent, like my body was demanding an answer. City, I murmured under my breath. I hear you. I began to work. I rerouted priority channels, feeding false congestion data into the upper-level monitors. Security response lagged by seconds, then minutes. I collapsed integration corridors mid-sequence, forcing emergency overrides to kick in where human judgment had to replace automation. I unlocked what they'd locked away. Historical layers, memory zones. The data Theo had said the maps ignored. The city responded instantly. Routes destabilized. Pressure spiked in places they hadn't accounted for. Packs didn't funnel. They scattered, slipping through gaps the system no longer controlled. Alarms erupted across the center. What the hell are you doing? A voice barked behind me. I didn't turn. You're corrupting the operation, one of the curators snapped, fury cracking his practiced calm. Stand down, now. I can't, I said evenly, and I won't. This is your career, the investor hissed. Everything you've built was built on people, I cut in. And I forgot that. I severed the last safeguard. The system shuddered, then cascaded into controlled failure. Messy, loud, impossible to hide. Security flooded the room, boots pounding, voices overlapping. I raised my hand slowly and stepped back from the console. Document everything, I said to no one in particular. Make it public. You wanted transparency, remember? Hands grabbed my arms, rough and unceremonious. As they dragged me toward the exit, I caught one last glimpse of the screens. The purge had stopped. Roots burned and reformed, alive again. Unpredictable. Free. I thought of Theo, of his steady hands, his sharp eyes, his refusal to believe in projects. I'd chosen the city, whatever that cost me. As the doors slammed shut behind me, cutting me off from the center forever, one thought echoed with quiet certainty. An alpha's power isn't in how much he controls. It's in what he's willing to lose. The Undercity didn't explode into chaos. It exhaled. That was the first thing I noticed as they moved me through the transition corridors. Security on either side, hands firm but uncertain now. The alarms from the control center echoed faintly above, distorted by distance and stone. But below us, the city shifted in a different rhythm. Roots opened. Not the clean corridors I'd designed, but the old ones. The ones Theo had taught me to see. Side passages peeled away from main tunnels. Hidden lifts activated. Doors that had been sealed for years slid open with protesting groans. Packs emerged. Not rushing, not panicking, choosing. Mixed groups flowed through junctions that had once been flashpoints. Tension crackling but contained, like a storm holding itself together. The aggression I'd felt before wasn't gone, but it had direction now. Purpose. The city was correcting. We reached a central node where old infrastructure intersected with newer systems, a place where no single authority fully held. Security halted, waiting for orders that didn't come. That was when I saw him. Theo stood near the edge of the platform, jacket dusty, posture loose but ready. He looked like he always did down here, part of the city rather than a visitor to it. Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. "You're late," he said. I laughed, breathless and disbelieving. "You're alive." Disappointing. I know. The security detail tensed, unsure. Theo raised a hand slightly, not in surrender, but in command. The packs nearby responded instantly, a subtle shift of bodies that made the message clear. "Don't." I stepped forward. "They know the purge failed," I said quietly. "But they'll spin it. They always do." Theo nodded. "Then we don't let them." We didn't have time for a long discussion. We never did. But the plan formed anyway. Quick and instinctive. Built from what we both knew. Pressure from below. Exposure from above. Theo's people flooded the node. Not aggressive. Just present. Watching. Waiting. Packs from different sectors held space together. Visible proof that the city could choose cooperation without coercion. I tapped into a public relay I'd left open on purpose. The feeds lit up across the upper city. Live views of stalled corridors, emergency overrides, officials shouting over one another. My voice cut through the noise, calm and unmistakable. "Is Alex Calder," I said, "lead architect of the integration project." A ripple moved through the crowd. "The operation you're seeing was never about healing the city. It was about control, about removal." Screens flared to life around us, projecting the data I'd unlocked. The restricted plans, the extraction routes, the lists. Gasps. Shouts. Fury. Theo leaned in beside me, voice low. "Push harder." I did. "Look at the routes," I continued. "Look at who they targeted. These weren't threats. They were communities." A familiar voice cut in over the channel. The curator, tight with fury. "This broadcast is unauthorized. Stand down immediately." "No," I said. "You stand still." The pressure mounted fast. Drones hovered uncertainly above the node, unable to advance without escalating. Packs held their ground, eyes up, bodies aligned. Theo stepped forward then, facing the cameras without flinching. "We don't want your project," he said. "We want room to live. Routes we choose. Places you don't rewrite every time they get inconvenient. The words hit harder than anything I could have said. The city listened. You could feel it. The way tension redistributed. How aggression bled into resolve. The memory zones pulsed, feeding the pressure back into the system, forcing acknowledgement instead of suppression. The project collapsed under its own weight. Orders contradicted each other. Overrides failed. Public opinion surged faster than containment protocols could react. By the time official channels went dark, it was over. Security withdrew, not defeated, but exposed. The system couldn't pretend this was controlled anymore. I let the relay die, and finally turned to Theo. "You came back," I said. He shrugged. "Someone had to make sure you didn't martyr yourself without backup." A smile tugged at my mouth. "We make a good team." "Careful," he said. "That sounds like a project." I laughed. The tension breaking at last. Around us, the city moved. Messy, loud, alive. Packs negotiated space face to face. Routes formed organically, not imposed but chosen. For the first time since I'd spoken the word integration out loud, the city didn't growl. It watched. And it chose us back. The scandal had a sound. It wasn't shouting or sirens. It was the constant, low roar of a city arguing with itself. Feeds overlapping, analysts dissecting, officials scrambling to reframe what had already been seen. I watched it from a borrowed chair in a borrowed room. The kind of place no one bothered to secure because it wasn't supposed to matter. My name was everywhere. Disgraced architect. Rogue alpha. Whistleblower. They cycled through labels like bandages, trying to stop the bleeding. The decision came faster than I expected. Effective immediately. Clearance revoked. Position terminated. No ceremony, no apology. Just a clean cut. I closed the message and let my wristband go dark. Outside, the city didn't collapse. Routes reformed without permission. Autonomous zones held. Packs negotiated borders face to face. Arguments loud but real, unfiltered by committees or models. It was messy. It was alive. Theo found me later, leaning in the doorway like he always did, half amused, half cautious, as if he wasn't entirely sure I'd still be there. "So," he said, "you're unemployed." "Technically," I replied. "I'm liberated." He snorted and came in, dropping into the chair opposite me. For a moment we just sat there, listening to the city hum through the walls. "I'm sorry," I said eventually. "About before. About not seeing it sooner." Theo studied me, eyes sharp but tired. "You didn't build the knife," he said. "You just forgot who it was pointed at." "That's worse," I muttered. "Only if you don't learn." I nodded, the weight of that settling deep. "I thought cities needed fixing," I said, "like broken machines. And now?" He asked. I looked out the narrow window at the layered sprawl beyond. The lights, the shadows, the movement threading through it all. "They need listening," I said. "They need room to argue, to remember. Not healing. Honesty." Theo smiled then, small and real. "Careful," he said. "That almost sounds wise." I felt something ease in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding tight. "What happens next?" I asked. He shrugged. "We keep the routes open. Make sure no one closes them quietly. Together." He met my gaze, something unspoken passing between us. "Yeah," he said. "Together." Outside, the city shifted. Restless, imperfect, alive, not integrated, just breathing. The new autonomous zones didn't announce themselves. They didn't have names yet, or polished boundaries. They grew the way living things did, tentatively at first, then with quiet confidence. A shared kitchen here. A reclaimed transit node there. Routes negotiated in chalk and conversation instead of code. Theo and I worked out of a converted relay station that smelled faintly of dust and coffee. The screens were old, patched together from salvaged parts. Nothing proprietary. Nothing locked. Perfect. "Don't put the marker there," Theo said, leaning over my shoulder. "That route floods when the east vents kick on." I erased the line without arguing. "You could have told me 5 minutes ago. You could have asked," he shot back. I smiled despite myself. We fell into a rhythm that felt dangerously like domesticity. Mornings arguing over maps, afternoons walking routes together, me listening, him pointing out the subtle signs I would have missed before. Evenings ended wherever we were when hunger won, street stalls, shared meals, sometimes just bread and something warm to drink. No grand declarations, no labels, just choice, repeated. One night, as we sat on the station steps watching lights flicker across the lower tiers, Theo nudged my knee with his boot. You know, he said casually, for an ex-top-tier architect, you're pretty good at taking notes. High praise, I replied, from a man who once told me not to say integration unless I wanted to lose teeth. You learned fast. I looked at him, really looked. The city's glow softened the lines of his face, but the sharpness was still there. The awareness, the way he always watched for exits, even now. I'm not going anywhere, I said quietly. Theo didn't joke this time. He nodded once, accepting it for what it was. Love, I was learning, didn't arrive like a finished plan. It emerged when you stopped forcing it. The city breathes differently when you stop trying to command it. I feel it now, not as pressure, not as pain in my teeth, but as a steady pulse beneath my feet. Uneven, alive, honest. I don't design from above anymore. I walk. I listen. I sketch with people instead of over them. Sometimes all that means is holding space while a disagreement burns itself out without intervention. Theo still runs routes. He always will. Some days I follow, other days I wait, trusting the city to bring him back when it's ready. We meet in the middle more often than not. From the relay station's roof, the megapolis spreads out in layers of light and shadow. No single pattern, no perfect symmetry, just movement. I think back to the first time the city growled at me, how I mistook resistance for sickness, how easily I believed healing meant control. I know better now. Cities aren't machines, neither are people. They remember. They respond. They choose. Beside me, Theo folds a map with practiced ease and slips it into his jacket. Ready? He asks. I nod and take his hand, not to lead, not to follow, but to walk alongside. Below us, the city continues its imperfect song. The city didn't need fixing. It needed honesty.